We can't wait for Iran to bomb Tel Aviv with a nuclear weapon. We can't wait for that. So the real solution to all the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas is to kill the snake by hitting its head. But I'm afraid that the U.S. won't help.
Mainstream media gives you the impression that there is nothing good about America. In direct contrast to that, my podcasts will prove by examples that America has always been and still is the land of opportunity for everyone.
Welcome back to our discussion with Carolyn Glick. Now, Carolyn, we all know that Iran is the instigator, the source of all of the problems in the Middle East. Iran supports Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, all with the same goal of eliminating Israel. On top of that, it's reported that Iran is only months away from producing a nuclear weapon. So the crucial question, can Israel wait until Iran has the bomb, or will it attack preemptively?
If we want to live, there are certain things that we have to do, right? And one of them is prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear armed state. And so what we saw, again, it's a very crazy situation because we're in the knot after knot. We've been tied into knots where the United States said, "Oh, you don't need domestic military production. We'll give you military aid. You buy from us. You don't have to make missiles. You don't have to make drones. You don't have to make bullets for your assault rifles. You don't have to make assault rifles. You don't have to make artillery shells. You don't have to make tank shells. We'll give it all to you." So Israel closes down these production lines, and then lo and behold, we get invaded, we go to war, and then the United States says, up. So they've been slow walking all of these offensive systems to Israel basically since December. They had taken away all of Israel's emergency stores and moved them to Ukraine.
I remember that.
In January of 2023. And so October 2023, we're invaded. And our stores are empty. So what the massive rearmament or armament of Israel that everybody saw at the beginning of the war was replenishing the supplies that the United States had taken, and that they had these pre-positioned military supplies that were supposed to be used by Israel in the event of emergency, but they moved it all to Kiev. So they had to replenish those emergency stores. And really, since December, we've seen this slow walking of all these offensive arms. So the artillery shells, the tank shells, even the bullets and ordnance for our aircraft. So, we allowed ourselves to be placed in this trap. People like me were screaming, "Stop it, don't do it, don't agree to this." But, we were minority voices. Now, there are a lot more people who have joined me since October 7th, which is heartening. But, we have to wean ourselves off of this dependence on American military assistance. We have to be partners, not supplicants. I don't think it's healthy for either side. But be that as it may, so what are you going to attack Iran with? When are you going to attack Iran? When you're looking at a massive war with Lebanon, there are so many different calculations that you have to make in terms of how many arms do we have, how many do we need, how long do we have to plan ahead for, and what do we need for Iran? What do we need here? So what happened, for instance, on April 13th, Israel was attacked
by Iran.
They shot 300 cruise ballistic missiles and drones at Israel in one night. And so obviously the question was, and most of them didn't get through, right? Over 90% of them were intercepted. The United States like to take the Biden-Harris administration were taking credit for intercepting, but they intercepted a fraction of what didn't come through, and Israel could have done that on its own because the Americans were able, I think it was the cruise missiles are slower than the ballistic missiles. The Americans were intercepting the cruise missiles. Israel was intercepting the cruise and ballistic missiles and the drones.
And actually Jordan downed some.
Well,
of them,
Jordan did too, right? Good for Jordan. Anyway, so but
the vast majority were Israel.
But the vast majority with American support, with the support of other governments, Arab governments, including Jordan, they were intercepted, and some of them got through. I can't remember. There's 5% or something got through. So the question after this, after we had the Anera Shapiro doctrine of catching missiles en route, what are we going to do next, right? So we have to retaliate for this unprovoked attack on Israel. And the Americans said, no, you can't. Biden said, take a win. Like defending against wanton aggression is a win. No, it's a defense. You take out the missiles.
Still got hit.
We still got hit. And somebody died. A Bedouin girl died in the South. So she doesn't count. She's an Israeli. We don't count her. Yeah. That's nothing. You know, if she were Palestinians, we would all be hearing about it on the front page of the New York Times for weeks. Yeah. And we would be on trial for genocide. But no, here, not a big... Take a win, the president of the United States said. And then Israel said, no. Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we can't do that. We'll look like idiots. We have to retaliate. So the Americans let Israel do a symbolic retaliation, which involved taking out an anti-aircraft installation and some other things, which were really just, to expose capabilities as opposed to using them. But we have to use them is the thing. So the question is when to use them. So now we've shown our hand. We can hit them. We killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran in an Iranian Revolutionary Guard guest house.
Beautiful.
Right? Which was gorgeous, right? It was great.
Beautiful.
Boy, was that ever a smile.
Beautiful. What a story. But if you made a movie about that, people would say, well, that's unrealistic.
Exactly.
Even James Bond couldn't do that.
Right. Well, he wasn't much of a spy. Right. But he was very debonair, but he wasn't much of a spy. Yeah.
And it only killed him and his bodyguard.
Yeah.
His room.
Because God forbid we should do anything else. We would be accused of genocide.
Another Iranian or something. Right.
But anyway, so yeah, that was beautiful. But the point is that there's a lot. Iran is a target-rich environment. They have the nuclear installations. They have the missile installations.
What about just killing the mullah?
Yeah, these are singular targets, but there's a lot of installations. And really what has to happen in Iran, and I know this sounds like a neocon plot, but you have 85%, 90% of the Iranian people are in open rebellion against the regime. They hate this regime, right? And they're dying for assistance, and nobody, and people say, well, what's going to come after? And I say,
worry about that later.
I don't know.
Right.
What we have now is the problem.
Death. Right.
If Iran is able to get their act together, fine. Any successor regime is going to take a very long time to get organized and up and running. And in the meantime, you take away all of their military capability, their nuclear capabilities. What's wrong with that scenario?
Right.
Nothing.
Don't worry about what happens next.
I mean, because maybe things will be bad later, but
can't be worse.
Let my kids deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
can't be worse.
And so,
because as I recall, before the mullahs took over, before Jimmy Carter failed to support the Shah of Iran, right? It was a Western-oriented country. Women went to college. They had jobs. They were an ally of the United States and of Israel. And then, because we didn't, when the Shah got sick, we didn't support him or put his son in place. Then these theocrats took over, these maniacs, and have been suppressing the entire population of Iran. The women are just chattel now.
Yeah. And they're in open rebellion. We're marking today the 2-year anniversary of the execution of Mahsa Amini, who was a Kurdish Iranian woman who was killed brutally by the regime because her hijab wasn't put on properly. Literally, that's why she was killed, because they didn't like...
It's not that she didn't have it.
No, it was that she wasn't wearing it properly.
Right.
And, this sparked nationwide revolt led by women. I mean, talk about, feminist heroes.
And who was president then? Was it Obama? He didn't say a word.
No, it was Biden.
And the U.S. didn't say a word.
And,
to support the people.
And it was supporting women. That was
Where
the
are the
thing.
women's groups in America talking about that?
Nowhere. And that's why that this feminist chic, it's all a fraud, because the true heroes, the heroines of
those women
of the world in terms of women's rights are in Iran.
Yep.
And nobody except, reactionary conservatives like Carolyn Glick, are standing up for them, or my counterparts in America. You just, how can you not be awestruck by women who risk literally being murdered,
shut down in the streets,
to let their hair out, to walk around the streets without being fully covered? And how can you not just be inspired by their example. It just for nothing else. What you should stand with them because it's an extraordinary expression of the human spirit that you see on the streets of Iran. And instead, the U.S. government stood by and allowed them to be brutally, brutally repressed. It was a terrible thing to watch. And then, Iran comes out triumphant, right? The regime, this evil regime that's killing their own people because that's what they believe in.
Unfortunately, America used to be the policeman of the world, and now defund the police. There is no America to be policeman of the world. Even look at the Houthis. They're jeopardizing shipping all over the world because they control some strait. And now shipping has to go around Africa, or it costs a fortune. Insurance costs have gone up dramatically for these shippers. And when they bomb a U.S. base and kill a few airmen, we send, a few missiles over, and that's it.
It's the same thing. America is saying, we're protecting shipping by
stopping
by catching a couple of them.
We could wipe out the Houthis in a week.
They shot a ballistic missile into Tel Aviv, and Israel blew up.
That was just today.
No, I'm not talking about the one from today. I'm talking about the one from a couple months ago, and Israel blew up the port in Hudaydah. Why didn't the Americans do this already? And the funny thing is that when the Houthis started attacking Israeli shipping and blocking basically the port of Eilat, which is at the mouth of the Red Sea that it goes to when you cross over the Suez Canal, you get to Eilat. That's Israel's Red Sea port. Mm-hmm. We have ports on the Mediterranean. We have this one port in the Red Sea in the city of Eilat. And that's basically been shut down since October 7th because the Houthis began attacking the ships that were going to the port of Eilat. And so now almost all shipping to Israel has to go around to the Mediterranean. And you're right, except another story, now it's going by land, but that's another story. So the point is that they're shutting down a major port in Israel, and there was an Iranian espionage ship. Israel had already blown up its precursor, its predecessor, but the Iranians have been directing all of the Houthi missiles attacks against shipping with this sort of espionage, a spy ship in the mouth of the Red Sea. And so the Americans told the Israelis, you're not allowed to blow that up. Why? Because we want to deal with Iran, because we don't want to get the Iranians directly involved in the war, because. Yeah. So we're taking care of it. So the Americans put together this multilateral task force with the Brits and some other NATO forces, I think, that said they're going to take care of the Houthis, right? Okay, Israel, this isn't your problem. Which, by the way, it's
very big to us.
From an American naval perspective, why was the American Navy even established? It was established to fight the Barbary pirates. It was to protect international shipping, right? That was it. Maritime rights. That was what.
And the Barbary pirates were Muslims,
right? This was off the coast of Morocco, the Berbers, and so North Africa. So the Americans came in to fight Arab pirates, to fight Arabs who were doing the same thing that the Houthis are doing. So the Americans, who would seem like a perfect role for the U.S. Navy, take out the Houthis. That's what you guys have been doing since time immemorial. But no, what the Americans did was they blocked Israel from taking, again, effective offensive action against the Houthis. And then instead of doing it themselves, the Americans and the Brits and all the rest of it started intercepting missiles en route to targets. And not all of them, as you said. Many of the ships have been attacked since this task force began its work. So what are you doing? So you're sending all of these.
All you have to do is destroy that Iranian ship that's guiding.
You should have. That was what should have happened in October. And the Houthis should be deposed by December. You can't allow the Bab el-Mandab, which controls shipping to the Red Sea, from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean through the Suez Canal. You can't allow that to be blockaded. What are you, stupid? 20% of oil exports go through there. So you're talking about, increasing world oil prices because you're protecting the Houthis? That's insane. And why are you protecting the Houthis? Because they're an Iranian equity, just like Hezbollah in Lebanon, just like Hamas in Gaza. Why are you doing this? It's crazy. You're playing against yourself. No.
It makes perfect sense if you just accept one premise.
Which is
Obama hates America.
Yep.
So helping enemies of America is hurting America, and that's Obama's goal.
Yep.
So it makes perfect sense. That's the only thing you have to get your head wrapped around, that we are being ruled, not governed anymore. We're being ruled by a man and his coterie that hate this country.
And when you realize that, then you realize that then everything makes sense.
Everything
and,
makes
you know,
sense.
my friend,
Why would you sign a deal with Iran, the JPOAC or whatever, that gave them access over a certain number of years to the nuclear weapons and gave them funding and reduced all of the rules and laws that we put in place to constrain them, to constrain their use of funding when we eliminated those restrictions? Why do you think we left behind $50-odd billion of war material in Afghanistan?
90 billion.
Was it 90 billion?
90 billion. But who's counting, right? The Taliban have become the biggest exporters of weapons, and they're all American.
Right. Now, people could say, well, we couldn't get them out in time. First of all, there was no time frame. We could have gotten them out.
Exactly.
But you certainly could have destroyed them. We didn't do that. And why is that? Why? Because it helps enemies of America. Barack Obama is the Manchurian candidate.
So now he's just finishing his third term in office.
He's finished, and now it's going to be the fourth and maybe fifth term with Kamala Harris. Enemies of America. And yet we have people who think he's suave, he's sophisticated, he's nice, he doesn't offend anybody, he's not tough. That's certainly true.
Well, who was it who said that they liked the crease in his pants? Right?
Sure. It's we're in a worry, and if Israel does attack Iran preemptively, which I think it has to do, we can't wait for Iran to bomb Tel Aviv with a nuclear weapon. We can't wait for that. So the real solution to all the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas is to kill the snake by hitting its head. But I'm afraid that the U.S. won't help. And I'm pretty sure the U.S. won't help in that case. As a matter of fact, the U.S. might indeed give confidential information about the attack to Iran.
Well, they've already apparently done that, and then, that was the thing with Biden's famous don't at the outset of the war, which in Israel most people thought was directed only against Iran and Hezbollah, don't join Hamas. But, it was also directed against Israel, in fact, primarily because the Iranians and Hezbollah weren't listening to him. What he said made no impact on them. And the only people it made an impact on were Israelis. Whereas the Israeli government, the Israeli military said, oh, we better not go after Lebanon because Biden just told us don't. Mm-hmm. So that, it's a very...
And it's not that Netanyahu doesn't have the backbone, but without parts for the F-35s, the F-15s, without weapons, and that's what Obama or Biden, I call it O'Biden, is threatening. That's what he's threatening. Don't means if you do it, I'm not going to do it. You're not going to get any weapons.
Well, that was what they just also said most recently in terms of the deal with Hamas, right? Is that, after Hamas executed the 6 hostages, and it's clear that there's no deal, right? I mean, and if you want a deal, you don't execute 6 hostages. It's very simple.
Well, people argue that was a rogue, they're just some soldiers. Of course not.
How it wasn't a rogue? I mean, this is off, but it wasn't a rogue operation because after they were executed, Hamas started releasing tapes, videos that they had taken of the hostages pleading for their lives that had been taken recently. So the point is that the whole thing was canned, that it was a psychological warfare operation that that these 6 poor souls paid for with their lives, because this is precisely what Hamas was moving towards, which was to get the Israeli people to cry uncle. And so you have the left that's participating in this 100%. You have the Americans who are participating in this 100%. But what I was going to say was that, the whole concept that the United States is putting forward of a deal, of a this or that, there was never, it was all it was all just a way of trying to get Israel to capitulate.
Right.
And that's what they're doing with Iran. They want to make a new deal with the Iranians. They're talking about that. They want to negotiate. They're saying, oh, it's Russia now. Russia is giving Iran the nuclear bomb. And what we really need to do is negotiate a new deal with them. I mean, it's all like...
They have nothing to gain.
It's all a way to
gain.
give Iran the bomb, and
Right.
when you look at Israel, we're in this position where our best friend is telling us we're allowed to catch missiles en route to our country, and the Americans might help us catch them from time to time, but we have to allow the threat to our very existence continue to grow and continue to grow and continue to grow until to the point where it doesn't matter how many we're able to catch because there are going to be too many coming in to make a difference.
One getting through is enough.
Well, I mean, it's not just one either,
Carolyn, with the current war in Gaza and missiles raining down on Israel on a daily basis from Hezbollah and just yesterday from the Houthis, I just don't know how the Prime Minister and his cabinet are able to sleep at night. So for a moment, let's talk about something else. What do you think of the status of the Abraham Accords, the treaties between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco? Is there a chance that Saudi Arabia will form a closer relationship with Israel?
So first of all, regarding the Abraham Accords of the countries that signed on, Sudan is in the middle of a civil war, so that's kind of on the back burner. Is actually what's going on there and in that region is very disturbing and terrifying, but that's a different discussion. But the entire region will also with Ethiopia and Somalia, they're all sort of on the verge of a regional war in North Africa, which is a problem in Northeast Africa. So, and that's also and Iran is involved with that, and obviously the Houthis are involved with that, and it's, if you just look at the map, it's another hotspot that Iran is generating. And, but what's notable, and this, I alluded to it earlier, and I didn't want to digress too much, but I said that the port of Eilat is closed, basically, because of the Houthis. So what's happened before the Hamas invaded, when we're talking about expanding the Abraham Accords to maybe include Saudi, which we'll get to in a second. So the concept that President Biden put forward, and obviously this wasn't his idea, but whatever, is that we would have travel that goes from Asia to the UAE, which is a major hub, and then it would cross overland through Jordan and into Israel, and then from the port of Haifa to Europe. And that would massively shorten shipping times from Asia even to Europe. And obviously Israel would be a major beneficiary of this. So we're interested in it. And it would be part of the total integration of Israel into the transportation infrastructure of the region. And it would be extremely important for all concerned. Everybody involved in this highway would benefit from it, and obviously European markets would benefit from it tremendously. So what we found is that as a result of the war, as a result of the Houthis, ironically, what it's done is massively expand the trade between Israel and its partners in the Abraham Accords, because that highway that was envisioned by Biden is largely already happened.
It's a physical highway or it's aircraft?
They're actually, they're highways now. We haven't expanded the highways, but the existing infrastructure is already being used. So you're already getting massive expansion of shipping through the port of Haifa to Europe from the UAE, where they're getting shipments to the UAE from India and places like that in Asia.
And then it goes overland.
And then it goes overland from the UAE through Jordan and into Israel. I think it goes through Saudi. So that this is already happening. So the vision that the president expounded on in a G7 meeting in the summer of 23 is already happening now. And it's happening because of the Houthis. that are blocking the shipping, the maritime shipment, so that this required an alternative, and this is the only alternative, and that's why it's being implemented. So ironically, this war, and Hamas even said it at a certain point, that it was in order to undermine the Abraham Accords, and what it's done is strengthened them. So that's actually a benefit and a very significant one, and that's something that hasn't been spoken about much at all, and perhaps the less said the better. I don't know, but it's not a secret. So, and then regarding Saudi, so the problem with Saudi Arabia is that, again, due to American pressure, the Obama administration or the Biden administration or the Harris administration in the future, they have two basic obsessions. One is to appease Iran, and the other one is to establish a Palestinian state. These are the two things that they care about, and they don't care about anything else. So the Saudis never made the establishment of a Palestinian state a condition for normalizing their ties with Israel under the Trump administration, but the Biden administration insisted on essentially giving the Palestinians veto power, restoring the Palestinian veto over Israel-Arab peace, and the Saudis aren't going to be less pro-Palestinians than the Americans, so they agreed to this demand. So now they're saying that they're not going to normalize their ties with Israel unless Israel makes a concerted effort, takes irrevocable steps to establish a Palestinian state. And, around 90% of Israeli Jews oppose Palestinian statehood after October 7th. You're not going to get a deal. You have over 90 members of 120-member Knesset signed on a declaration back in December, I think, that said no to a Palestinian state. And so here are the Saudis saying, well, we'll normalize ties with you after you agree to one. And the answer is not going to happen.
Right.
Now, does it matter? Yeah, it matters. It would be better if we had a deal with the Saudis, but basically we already have normal trade ties with Saudi Arabia. We'd have bigger ones. We'd have more. It would be more lucrative to both sides. It would be better for both countries if we were able to do some sort of a formal deal. But I think actually
doesn't matter.
I think that the inertial forces towards expanding economic ties, and nobody's talking about, to a degree, but nobody's thinking, we want to have Saudi tourists in Israel. We don't really.
No.
And we don't really want to have Israeli tourists in Saudi Arabia. If you're a business traveler and you're Israeli, you get a visa to go into Saudi Arabia. There's not, so in that sense, we already have normal, more.
Understood.
So I think.
Understood.
I think that.
But it'd be nice to get military agreement that we can fly over to
that
attack
wouldn't,
Iran.
They wouldn't do that publicly either.
Anyway, they wouldn't.
So that's not something that's contingent on a formal normalization agreement. There's always a question of what is the added value to normal ties, to open normal ties, and it's significant, but it's not determinative. It's not decisive. It's not gonna. That's not gonna make the difference.
Yeah, it's not worth us saying yes. We'll support a Palestinian
our
state.
national suicide.
Right.
No.
Let's shift a bit from Israel's challenges with its neighbors in the Middle East to its challenge in managing the relationship with the U.S. Certainly, the U.S. has been helpful in supplying Israel with some of its weapon needs, and it was somewhat helpful in shooting down missiles and drones, which were launched from Iran in April of this year. But given the pressure from leftists and pro-Hamas voters in the U.S., on the current administration, do you see the U.S. pulling back its support of Israel?
Obviously, it depends on who wins in November, but the fact that it depends on who wins in November means, it's that Israel has to scale back its strategic dependence on the United States, no matter who is president.
Right. Because you never know.
Because you don't know.
It can change.
And and when you only have one party defending you, and you don't have any influence over what happens to Republicans, what happens to Democrats. Israel isn't the Democrats, when they turn against Israel, or certain factions in the Republican Party who are anti-Israel, they're not anti-Israel because of anything that Israel did. They're responding to domestic pressures. They're responding to prejudices. They're doing a lot of things, but nothing that they're doing is in response to something that Israel did. Israel is being vilified for certain things that it does, but that's an outcome, not a cause. Okay? And so when you realize that, and you realize that you're on this roller coaster, one day the United States is a true ally, and the next one they're passive aggressive against you, then the obvious response is no. Israelis, but per capita, are the most pro-American country in the world outside of the United States, even more than some Americans.
More so than the United States.
I mean, Israelis love the United States and they love the American people. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And Israel doesn't have a superpower that we can replace them. I mean, the Egyptians decided that they're not buying F-16s. They're buying, I wrote it in the New York Post last week, but they're buying J-10s from China.
Wow.
And people
that's
say
a huge shift. And they're still getting money from the U.S.
$1.3 billion. And they're giving the United States the heave-ho. They're ridiculing America. But why are they doing it? Because the United States second guesses everything that they do, and the Chinese say automatic resupply, just whatever, sign on the dotted line and be nice to us and use Huawei, and And by the way, the fact that Egypt uses Huawei, under the national, what is it called, the NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act. Of 2019, I think the United States isn't allowed to supply any military supplies to any country that works with Huawei. But nobody enforces that, obviously, just like they don't enforce sanctions against Iran. All that being said, the point is that Israel is America's ally. Israel will always be America's ally, but Israel will be a better ally to the United States if it's not America's dependent. And when Israelis are looking at the United States now, when we're seeing what the Biden administration is doing, and talking out of both sides of its mouth, but in fact slow walking critical weapon systems to Israel that they told us not to manufacture because the United States would supply them for us. The Israelis are. We've already jump-started rebuilding our domestic industrial base for domestic production, and that includes ordnance for the Air Force. That includes tank and artillery shells. That includes assault rifles. That includes bullets. Yeah. So I mean, because we see. Yeah. I mean, these are basic military supplies. We're not talking about Star Wars. We're not talking about anything next generation over the horizon weapons. We're talking about bullets. Things that you need in order to kill the bad guys, and we need them. Right. And if the Americans are going to be slow walking them, and by the way, it's not just out of animosity, it's also that the United States itself has gutted its defense military industrial capacities, so that when they're stuck, when they're swarmed essentially by a ground war in Europe with Ukraine and Russia, and they have to supply the Ukrainians, and then they get swamped with this Middle Eastern war where they're supposed to supply Israel. The United States has a backlog of over a year, I think, before they're able to make up what they've already done in terms of supplying the Ukrainians with javelins. So the United States itself is not capable, has not expanded its domestic industrial base for military production to the level it needs to supply its own needs. Not to mention those of its allies that have grown dependent on American supply. So, even under the best of circumstances, if the United States was saying, look, Israel, we're not going to second guess you. Absolutely, we understand you need to win this war. You go do it.
Even under those circumstances, they can't do it.
They can't do it. So under all circumstances, Israel needs to expand massively and very quickly our production capabilities at home. Just like America does. America needs to expand its own production capabilities. So all of us need to do it.
We can't be buying bullets from the Chinese or from Russia.
Although you're buying a lot of other things, like a lot of the components of making those missiles from China.
I know exactly. Right.
So we've grown fat and happy.
I sat down tonight, being somewhat. I'm always worried. But now I'm doubly worried. What a conversation with you,
Well, can I give you some optimism?
Yeah, please.
Is that okay?
It's okay.
Because otherwise you're going to be looking in your medicine cabinet for that strychnine,
right.
and we want to...
Or Adderall or something.
Something.
Antidepressants.
Right. So the point is that, one of the things that we discovered in Israel after October 7th, and in a way you discovered it after September 11th in the United States 23 years ago, but you see it every day in Israel. And I said at the beginning when I was talking about the incredible sacrifice that the Israeli people are making and how all this war is an immediate issue for all of us, is just how heroic the Israeli people are. Just how unbelievable this younger generation of Israelis are, the way that they step up to the plate. People forget or people didn't know after, on October 7th, they started an emergency call-up of reservists. And we had a massive call of 100,000. We're a country with 9 million people. And you had 130% rate of enlistment that, everybody who was called up came, plus 30% who weren't called up said, you made a mistake, you didn't call me, but I'm here anyway,
I know of the stories of people who are beyond the age of being in the reserves. They showed up.
So, you have a citizenry that recognizes that this is an hour of need and we have to step up and we have to save our country, and we are. And we're not gonna be destroyed. And I absolutely have faith in this generation of Israelis and in the people as a whole. Everybody's looking and saying, "Oh, look at all these people in Tel Aviv that are rioting, calling for surrender." This is a tiny minority of Israelis.
I know
it's just
that
all
but
of
they're
their
very well organized,
and all of their friends own all of the fancy companies and control, all of these media organs that are pumping up their numbers, so they get 5,000 people show up. Oh, it's 500,000 people. It's always, to 100, 100 times their numbers. There's always the same thing over and over again. Every week we get the same thing. And then you look at the aerial photographs and you see that they're standing 6 feet away from each other. And it looks like, a much larger crowd than there actually is. And they hide it with these big banners.
No, but I have to give the left credit. They are organized. And when they say, let's have a rally, everybody salutes and shows up. Conservatives, I'm busy. I know,
but you also have to give credit to the fact that they have a bottomless pit of money.
Right.
Right.
They pay people in the United States.
I wanted to have a rally a couple of months ago when we were at something, and I was raising money for it, and I needed to raise like $300,000 for it. And then people started arguing, well, should we do that? Or should we have billboards? Or should we do this? Or should we do that?
That's Jews.
So that you have these Jews on one side who are arguing about the pennies, and then you look at the left, and they're able to spend $300,000 every week.
Yeah.
And you look at where did this money come from? But they have this endless supply of funding from wherever.
From America. A lot
coming
from
in.
New Israel Fund,
coming
from Soros.
Coming in. And European governments coming in, funding all this stuff. And, we're fighting over things that would make them, snort.
Right.
It's such a nothing for them. And so, and then the other thing is that the right organizes the Israelis, and we work really hard, and we bring in buses, and we bring in this, and we bring in that, and we print out the banners, and we get 50,000 people.
Right.
One that
the media doesn't show it.
I spoke at one that we had 35,000 or something like that, which was huge.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
It was big, and they were real people. They weren't fake. It wasn't 3,500 people that we said was 35,000. And it wasn't well covered. Put it that way. It was totally ignored by almost every media organ, right? And so people say, well, what's the point then?
Well, social media covers these things, and that's important.
Right. That's exactly right. So that's what that was. So we need to, have that base also to be able to come out and say, look, we're here, and we keep saying the silent majority is going to show up. Maybe, but you got to bus them in, because they you can see they have these big parking lots with all these buses. But the point, but I digress. The point of what I'm trying to say is just that, you see what the media wants you to see. You don't see the heroism.
Right.
You don't see...
And you don't see that 70% of the population of Israel is for completing the mission, killing Hamas.
No matter what. No matter what they throw at us, the numbers don't lie. The Israelis aren't shirking from duty. They're not walking away. They're not crying uncle. Doesn't matter how many tricks they play on us. Doesn't matter if they're from Washington or from the bunkers in Gaza or from Tehran. The Israeli people aren't buying it anymore. And so I don't know how long it's going to take. And we have a leader who's not going to walk away from this either. So I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know how many people are going to die because of this. I don't know. I mean, I don't. And again, this isn't in a faraway place. This is my neighborhood,
Right.
I don't know, but we're not going to walk away from this with anything other than victory. And I hope...
Impossible.
No, and I hope that, people outside of Israel will step up to bat and say, okay, we get it. We stand with you. Stop with this hemming and hawing. Don't try to negotiate with the people who just burned your babies alive. Mm-hmm. No. This is immoral to even talk about it. You cannot give any credence to anything that these people say.
Right.
And we won't. Right. We don't. We stand with you. We believe that you have to beat them. And we want you to. And we got your back. We got your back at the UN Security Council. We got your back at the International Criminal Court. We got your back at The Hague. Everything. Just go. You do your thing. That's all Israelis really need, is just for people to say we got your back. Because right now, we don't.
Get out of our way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, I have faith. It's crappy. It's hard. War is hell.
The Jews have always faced difficulty throughout the history of Judaism for 3,000 years.
But now we have our own army.
That's right. The difference is we have our own army and we have national pride. And
we have the greatest kids.
And we have God on our side. Yeah. God is on our side.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, for taking the time and for making the effort to speak with me today, given your very hectic schedule.
And don't forget to tell people to watch my podcast.
Okay. I want to thank you also for your accurate reporting and your insights into events in Israel and in the broader Middle East. And as she just reminded me, if you want to learn more about Caroline's work, you can go to her website. It's simple. www.carolineglick.com, all one word. Or you can watch The Caroline Glick Show on YouTube. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob, please subscribe and you'll be automatically notified of future podcasts in this series.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob. If you enjoyed these interviews with some of today's most influential thought leaders, please follow and rate the show on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget, you can also watch each episode on YouTube as well. We'll see you next time.